Phil, before we get into Skillwell, we were just at ASU GSV. Any hot takes? Anything there from your perspective that just jumps out?
I mean, relevant to my world, I'll say I just felt like the focus on skills-based learning was much bigger than I thought. I mean, we've been talking about it for a long time, whether you call it competency-based education or, results focused or whatever, but it does feel like it's reached kind of a fever pitch. Now, again, that may be that I was in an echo chamber of that, in the meetings that I had, but it does feel like that, and that's one hot take. The second hot take I'll say is I feel like, one of the things that I often say in business is that sometimes it takes a breakdown to have a breakthrough. And I feel like there are a lot of universities that are realizing that business as usual, and we've been saying this for a while, but it felt more real. Like business as usual is not going to work anymore.
Mm.
And so I talk to a lot of people in higher ed and even in corporate learning that are like, we've got to do things differently. I had one conversation with a university leader that said that where we were talking about like, you know, so much is still dependent on like the credit hour and it was like, well, yeah, well, we're going to blow that up. And I'm like, whoa, what do you mean? Like, that sounds, I want to be a part of that. So, um,
Right.
I think the people are recognizing that it's time for a breakthrough. I don't know that anybody's got that silver bullet, and I'm not sure there is one, but I think people are looking and people are willing to try new things, and willing to upset the apple cart in a way that they haven't been before. So it was a great conference. Weather's always beautiful in San Diego, but I I think the skills stuff and then the willingness to do something new and different is higher than it's been in the last few conferences I've been at.
I think there's a prior to the conference, but also reinforced at the conference. There's a there's a more steady through line on skills and on experiential learning and on work-based learning, whatever you want to call it, where regardless of really even the type of institution, there's just a general realization that more is necessary, right? Um, and yeah, I hope it is the breakthrough. Let's go back a little bit. So you've been in the industry for more than 2 decades. No, it's not calling you old. It's just acknowledging angel learning probably dates you the most. But angel learning, Blackboard, your time at Open LMS, and now Skillwell. Um, how does that journey shape you and even form your thoughts about how to lead in this moment at Skillwell?
Well, it's a really deep question. I think don't know we have a long time to unpack this. It might, and I don't know if you have a psychology degree or anything, because there may be some scars in here. Uh, I what I There are some things that I both love and I want to challenge us as an industry. I mean, being in the industry for a long time, obviously I understand it very well and I know the people very well. And I'll say in general, you've got this great group of people that are really trying to solve some of the most fundamental issues that we have as a society, right? If you believe, like I do, that education is one of the best, if not the best ways to create opportunities for people and to equalize people's opportunities, and you're in this industry, you have to be excited and optimistic about that. And there are a bunch of great people that both done a bunch of great work and are still doing a bunch of great work. I would love to be considered part of that list. I don't know if I deserve that or not, but I would like to put myself on that list. That said, I think one of the challenges that we have is kind of what we were just talking about is we may need some new voices, or we at least need the voices that really do understand to have some new thoughts and to have some new ideas for how to attack some of these problems. Because we've been talking about some of these things for too long, and we haven't been able to action them as much or as quickly as possible. And there are tons of perfectly valid reasons why, but we may need some new voices in there. So I think my experience has shaped my optimism and my hope about technology to being able to drive change because I've seen it do that. And I also would say that my experience, one of the things that I have to be careful of as a leader in this industry is that I don't let my experience color or constrain the way that I think about solving some of these big, hairy problems. Um, and I think a lot of us tend to just get in this, oh, well, this is, this is another hype cycle, or this is, we're currently working on this. And I was thinking back, we were joking about, you know, AI. There was a lot of obviously AI at ASU and I was just pointing people to the Angel Learning Second Life Island, where they could go host a course if they wanted. I don't know if it's still there or not, but there was a hype cycle for that at one point, and I don't think this is the same, but I also want to make sure that we're both embracing things and also challenging things in a way that we haven't. And I have to hold myself to that standard too, right? I need to be challenging the status quo within Skillwell. I had a email interaction with a client today where I challenged them. They challenged me and said, we need you guys to do more with your product. Here are some of the things that we need you to do better. And that's perfectly valid for a client to say that. And in the partnerships that we have with clients, I was able to say right back to them, yeah, we need to do that. You're right. And also, here's what we need you to do. Like, we need you to push on that. And I think those kinds of partnerships are especially important in education, where these are problems that have big societal impact. And I think we need to use the experience that we have, and then we also need to not be constrained by that experience.
Yeah, no, I love that. Um, I know you had a chance to speak with Chris Parrish at Podium Education. I feel like the both of you, from a leadership standpoint, come at partnership both with industry and higher ed in a very similar way. Um, and I think it's really kind of when I see it, I recognize it. There's a level of authenticity that has to meet the moment. You can't shy away from tough decisions and tough conversations, but you really need equal partners on both sides of the table. Um, it's not the traditional vendor institutional partnerships that will thrive. It's more deep than that, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you think about driving change in institutions and in a structure that's been around literally for hundreds. I'm taking a course right now from Trinity College Dublin. Um, I'm actually taking two courses from Trinity College Dublin. The university was founded in 1594, and I will say, like, I love the classes that I'm a part of, but the sign-up process kind of feels like it's 1594. Um, these are hundreds of, like, there are traditions that are hundreds of years old that have to be broken. And so some of the mechanisms that are in place, and for very good reasons, things like an RFP or a tender that's so important in higher ed procurement, that can often get in the way of innovation. The credit hour, like we were talking about before, and the way that funding in the US is tied to credit hours in most circumstances. These are things that are like firmly held beliefs that are important, and they're important for important reasons, but they also become constraints on solving some of the underlying problems. And yeah, if you've got a company that's innovative, and I think Skillwell is starting to become more innovative, and I think we will be more innovative going forward. We've got some great products that have been very innovative, and you've got a partner, whether it's an institution or a corporation that's innovative. If you really have that partnership, I think that you start looking at what are these things that are getting in the way of solving the underlying problem, and how do we get rid of those roadblocks, or how do we work around those roadblocks? And that type of partnership can be real, and it can add a ton of value for both the vendor and the partner institution, in ways that a traditional, let's fill out an RFP and get a score and win some business, that I don't know how much value is added there. I know you have to do that to protect, public funds and other things, and that's important. But I feel like we got to move beyond that in situations that have consequence.
Do you? I think we should probably talk a little bit about Skillwell. Let's
Okay.
jump into
Since that's
like.
my job, I feel like I should too.
I mean, I think this is the right moment to jump into Skillwell. Is my point. I think you're uh so for those that aren't aware, let's first explain what Skillwell is and really the moment that you entered in, because A, it's recent, and B, it was at the point of mergers. And so I think you can probably paint that picture better than I can in a few minutes, and then we'll kind of dive a little deeper into what it means for the education market?
Yeah. So about a year ago, I joined a company that came out of Trinity College Dublin called ETU, which was focused on some research that turned into a product around simulations for teaching people durable soft skills. Um, a nicely successful company. I would call it a subscale company at the time. And I came in as the new CEO last March, in March of 2025. And we started building a new version of our product that we released in November in beta and is now out and being used by clients, where you could build simulations using generative AI. Along the way, we met some owners of a company that's also based in Dublin, that had an adaptive learning platform. That company was called Realize It. It's a skills-based adaptive learning platform that's used both for online higher education, but also for employee training at corporations. And again, I would say it's a company that has a very innovative product, but was kind of subscale, super complementary with what we were doing at ETU. And so we brought the two companies together, relaunched it as Skillwell at the DevLearn conference in November. The products were integrated from day one, skill data transferring back and forth, the adaptive pathways that are available in what we now call Skillwell Adapt, can leverage simulation data from Skillwell Simulate. And so that's the new company. And I think we also, through the merger, I would say, moved out of that subscale category into what in most industries would be called very small business, but in ed tech is called mid-sized businesses, because we've got a lot of micro scale businesses in ed tech. And really excited about that. It allowed us to raise some money to invest in innovation, kind of clean up the two subscale businesses into a kind of modern operating entity with a full scale team. And that just happened the week of Thanksgiving. And so it's been about 4.5, 5 months that we've been operating as one company, and we're almost, through the integration process. But really, the culture has been remarkable. I think we were very fortunate in that these two companies were only located about 4 miles from each other, and about 40% of our team is in Ireland. So having people co-located during the transition, I think, was really powerful. Something we couldn't do during COVID, or if an acquisition is, in a faraway place. And so the integration has gone remarkably smoothly. The company's operating as one. Um, Most of the proposals and deals that we're working on right now are not for either one of the products. They're for the Skillwell platform, which is the unified adaptive platform plus simulation. And those are proposals uh, both to corporations, but also to higher education institutions that know that they need to go beyond what a standard LMS does, or they've got high consequence courses or high throughput courses, where again, the research that was done both at Trinity and some research that was done at University of Central Florida just shows significantly better results with adaptive platforms and immersive platforms. Um, and people want to take advantage of that. So very excited about where we are. I think the brand, I mean, Darin, you're an expert at this. I think the rebrand to Skillwell has gone really well. Like, I think people have really appreciated the new brand. I think it speaks more about what we do. And we've seen that in things like web traffic, brand awareness, the way that people respond to us at conferences. So I think doing that at the same time as we did the merger and rebranding and kind of doing it as a complete relaunch of the company, so far has gone really well. I'm sure we've had a couple little hiccups along the way, but the website not redirecting, all the little stupid stuff that happens when you do something that of that scale. But I just think it's been a really, the last 4 or 5 months have been really fun. And last thing on that is, I'll just say most of that is just because we've got some amazing people that came from both companies, and they're just, both companies, like I said, were subscale, and I think everybody was ready to like take the next step and like do the next thing. Um, and so bringing the companies together has now created the opportunity to do that. And I think I'm going to be in Dublin on Thursday of this week. And every time I'm in the office there, and like, even when I'm in Chicago with our team there, and we've got 4 people here in Indianapolis now, like when you're together with the team, like there's just an energy that's really real, and that's been really fun. So that's probably longer than you wanted to hear about Skillwell, but that's what we do and kind of how we got to where we are in April 2020, 2026,
Yeah.
2026. I think we're 2026 now, right?
Yeah. So I think that's great. And honestly, like it does feel intuitive to me to bring an adaptive learning platform and an immersive simulation type of platform together for the reasons that you just articulated. And I'm just thinking from a higher ed perspective, but when you when you look at kind of corporate learning and development versus higher ed application, like where is there symmetry? Where is there friction or just difference in application from your perspective? Or is it relatively similar?
I would say in the parts of higher education that we operate, it's actually fairly similar. Now when we say we operate in higher education, we aren't, you know, our platforms are not really supporting kind of traditional face-to-face courses that are done in a classroom with a lecture and all that type of stuff. We're really supporting online programs. A lot of those online programs that we support are career focused and skills focused. Um, and so the gap is not really as big as you think, because we're in that specific niche. If we were selling, classroom management software or something like that, it would be a much bigger stretch. But um, I can say what we're doing with some of the largest corporations in the world. Most of our corporate clients are, Fortune 500 and even Fortune 100 companies. What they're doing with training at scale and the tens of thousands of users is not that different than what like a University of Central Florida is doing in their online programs with
Mm.
tens of thousands of users, right? You're trying to test what skills they have. If they don't have them, make sure they get them through the training and learning that they achieve in the course, and then validate those skills and get the data, and whether that turns into a job or a promotion or a degree or a certificate, the output is less important than like what actually happened in the course. So I think the difference, we treat them very differently, and I would say the purchasing behavior is different between corporate and higher ed. But when you actually get to what a user is trying to do, whether that's a user that's building content or building a course or a simulation, or a user that's taking a course or a simulation, the use cases really don't feel that different once you're actually in the learning moment, because you're trying to learn something and you're trying to do it in the most efficient, best way possible, recognizing prior learning, taking on existing learning, and then trying to certify and validate that that learning has actually happened.
I guess I have a couple thoughts, but the first follow up to that is um, I feel like in the higher ed space, it's been articulated in several different ways that there's often a disconnect between um, definitions of or applications of skills, and in particular on the definitional level, um, there's always a fear that hey, we think we're developing this particular skill, but then the way it's being received on the corporate side is maybe something different. And I'm just curious, like, does that does that get more clear for a company like yours that's actually building in both the corporate space and in the higher ed space? Or do you feel like you've been doing it long enough that people just sort of accept the preset understanding and definition that you're working with?
There's a lot there if we wanted to get super philosophical about it. But I would guess what I'll say is I think again, the part of higher education that we operate in, which is in the online programs, sometimes for profit or semi for profit universities, and definitely in the career focused area, it's not as different as you think. And I don't think the definition of those skills are terribly different. We are used often by universities, career colleges, corporate partners, that are actually working with corporations to build content specifically for job readiness for a specific area. So we don't work with them, but I'll give an example here. Like Ivy Tech, I think in my home state, I'm very proud of our community college system that we have here in Indiana. It's, I think, one of the most innovative in the country. And they have direct partnerships with Cummins and Eli Lilly and all of the major employers in the state of Indiana. And so in that particular scenario, there's not a big difference between what the skills that Cummins and Eli Lilly need and um, what Ivy Tech is trying to produce. So like I think there in certain pockets we're starting to see that. Now again, I think there's a perfectly valid argument to say that, traditional higher ed is not just about getting people the skills they need to be employed. There's more to it than that. There's a societal impact, all that type of stuff. And I believe all that stuff to be true. And I hope that when my kids are of the age, they choose what's right for them, and that they get the right experience out of that, whatever that may be, and that it's maybe not just about job readiness unless that's what they need. But again, in the segment that we work, it's really about skills to create job readiness, whether that's for a corporation that's trying to train and onboard employees, or for a higher education institution that's got people taking an online program where probably one of the ways that that online program was marketed to them was by saying our job placement rate for people that complete this program or certificate is high, whatever that percentage number that is on the website or whatever it is. So in that specific realm, I don't think that the gap is as big. I think if you take a much broader view of higher education, which is again, perfectly valid view, I still think there are some gaps, but part of that is because we're talking about two different things. If we're talking about the societal impact of higher education, that's different than the impact of, is this student getting the skills that they need to go get that job? And so I think we have to treat those two things differently.
No, I think it makes sense. I would say too that just through the work that I've done over the last year and a half or so, and I like to often say that our regional comprehensive universities in the U.S. they serve somewhere near 5 million, which is just over a quarter of our students going through higher ed in the U.S. right now. Those regional comprehensives are, for the most part, really dialed in,
Yeah.
and have a real mature perspective on skill development in the context of uh, job readiness, right? And so I feel like, and I would also say they also seem to have an insatiable appetite for more things along the lines of what you guys are doing at Skillwell, because there's just there's so much sort of downward pressure on the curriculum to make sure that that they've really got it right, like that they can only you can only improve so much on the learning side. But boy, is there a lot of room to grow in terms of giving the right types of experiences that lead to the types of skills that are necessary for the job market. I just wonder, like, where do you see? I appreciate the online space that you're in, but like, if you had to kind of take a crack at like where the growth is in the market or the opportunity is in the market for a Skillwell to have its biggest impact in higher ed, is it does it expand beyond where you are today and just into more institutions and doing the same thing, or are there other applications that you feel like are worth pursuing as well?
That's a great question. I mean, there's definitely a lot of room to grow replicating the use case and the success that we've had with our existing higher ed clients. So there's definitely room to grow there. There's even room to grow within our existing clients. I mean, even some of our flagship universities like Tec de Monterrey in Mexico, UCF, University of Central Florida, and parts of the UNC system, like even some for-profits, Colorado Technical, like we have room to grow within those institutions. I think we have room to grow outside of that, and the driver of that is really going to be generative AI. And I'll explain a little bit about why. I think this is really important to understand the context. And Darin, you've been around long enough. You pointed out how old I am, so I get to equally say you've been around this industry for a while.
Sure.
Um, Adaptive learning kind of had this big buzz. I think it was about 15 years ago, and what if we look back, what happened was the first wave of AI that we don't talk about as much anymore, but this machine learning wave of AI hit about 15 years ago. And these algorithms that could test what people knew and present them with new content and all that type of stuff, those actually were pretty good even 15 years ago. The problem wasn't the technology in most cases. There were some adaptive platforms where the technology was bad. The problem was that if you really think about if you're building a truly adaptive and immersive course, you're not building one course. You're building 75 or 80 flavors
Mm,
of a course, right? You have to if
right.
you have 32 different branches of a course, then you need content to support that. And so the upfront cost of or the upfront investment of building that in a course was something that most universities were only willing to take on for their most important courses or their most highest throughput courses. And so people that tried adaptive learning 15 years ago were, I think, overwhelmed by the amount of work that it took to really make that possible. If you fast forward to today with the advent of generative AI, if you take the machine learning algorithms that have always worked and you support them with, content that is much cheaper, easier, and you could even argue free to build in either ahead of time or in real time, the idea of building 60 versions of the same course of all the branches that need to be built, that's not crazy like it was 15 years ago. That's in fact that's doable and we're doing it every day. And so if I can actually get to answering your question with all that background, what used to be available only to high throughput, high consequence, high profit, high revenue courses for institutions, with generative AI, you could absolutely apply adaptive learning to even a face-to-face course because the upfront investment to do that has come down like
Mm.
exponentially. So, yes, you can build those types of experiences, whether it's with our platform or another one, but hopefully with ours. Um, it is possible to go into that. I still think most people are going to start with those high volume, high throughput, high value, critical courses in their online programs. But there's no reason that those use cases couldn't expand beyond that to create better learning experiences. I was talking with somebody from UC Berkeley at ASU GSV, and um, I'm sorry, I think it was either ASU, it was actually both. It was CSU and Stanford were at the same table, and they were talking about because they stream most of their courses in real time, how something like and I'm going to probably get these stats wrong, less than 50% of the people actually go to class. A lot of them just watch it online,
Mm,
uh, and maybe that's okay, but like the what experiences do we want them to have in the learning moment? And that might not be sitting in a lecture hall. It might be having them taking practice simulations of real world situations, right? But if building that is going to cost a ton of time and energy and resource, you're not going to do it. Today, that doesn't have to be true anymore. So I like the idea of expanding use cases. I'm going to go tell my salespeople that Darin thinks that the market is much bigger. The market opportunity is much bigger than we believe. Our ICP, our ideal customer profile, just expanded greatly to regional comprehensives and everybody. Right?
No, I mean, I think it does. I think it kind of depends on it's it's really kind of it's two things. One is the market's ready. The other piece is so it's just whatever readiness means, right? I think we can both make a case for different parts of the market that are ready for more of this. And I would say more of this, I'll just define it by the the simulations leading to skill outcomes
Yeah.
in particular, right? And then there's some additional flexibility that you add on top of that. But what I what I wonder about from a capacity standpoint is um, Skillwell as sort of the platform. Do I do I see you guys as, if I'm the institution, do I see you guys as sort of my generative AI learning designer, or do I see you as I mean, are you enabling my ability to create content? Are you coming in with a certain amount of content?
No, we're really a platform for building content, but we provide tools that allow you to use generative AI, and those tools are not general, they're specific in how to build adaptive courses and how to build simulations.
Yeah.
Um, because we know that those are really powerful forms of learning. Um, and we've got decades of experience in building just those kinds. So like our ability to leverage generative AI, synthetic media to build really high quality simulations and then enable you to do that through our platforms, that's what we really bring. There are universities, companies that ask for our help, and we have an amazing team of instructional designers that can help, and designers that can definitely help institutions build that. But our goal, especially with generative AI, is in the current version of what we call simulate auto build. An instructor that has some level of expertise in their field can build a very high pedagogical quality simulation in half an hour, right? Like that just wasn't even feasible even 18 months ago. And now it is, both because of the way LLMs and synthetic media have evolved, but also because we've learned how to apply our expertise into taking those tools that exist and turning them into pedagogically sound, outcome driving, skill creating simulations. And so that's what we want to do. Is we're not going to become experts in every field and every subject, and create a bunch of titles and textbooks. Now, again, maybe a publisher would use our platform to help build out, improve their catalog. That's really, it's more of a platform that leverages those tools to enable um, instructors, instructional designers, content creators to go do that for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading in advance of this call a little bit and saw the what's it, UNC Charlotte that cut costs to deliver a course in a pretty significant capacity. Is that an example of
Yeah,
what you're talking about there?
yeah, absolutely. And we see that across the board. There's again, I would say the ability to create content, like generic content, I think has become almost effortless or frictionless. Where we want to really add value is making that content hyper relevant at the point of need, and that's where the adaptivity, the immersiveness of our platform comes into play. If I go to, you know, Chat GPT or Claude or whatever the flavor of the month or for you is, I can say, "Hey, tell me everything about, this subject," and it will shoot out, as much information as I ever want. Now, there may be a couple hallucinations in there or something, but in general, I'm probably gonna get what I need. But to take that information and turn it into actual learning and to then be able to validate that people know and understand those things, that's different.
Right.
The simulation is a great example. I mean, the research that came out of Trinity College when ETU, which became Skillwell, was formed, showed that simulations, immersive simulations, not only can they be as powerful as face-to-face learning, sometimes they can be even more powerful than face-to-face learning. If you think about um, the ability to practice multiple times, like if you're doing role playing exercises or if you're trying to teach people how to have difficult conversations or negotiate as part of a business degree, if you're doing role playing with another classmate in a classroom, that's not actually very realistic because you're talking to another business student who doesn't have experience. Or if you're doing it with your professor, that's kind of that's not really what you're going to be doing in the real world. The idea that you could practice that multiple times with, again, a synthetic character, but a synthetic character that's been trained by, um, you know, billions and trillions of data points through LLMs, then you can practice that multiple times in a safe environment. That can be real learning. And so if the skill is, business negotiations, or empathetic listening, like those are skills that we can actually do better in a simulated world often than we can in a face-to-face world. Now there's a place for face-to-face too, don't get me wrong, but there are certain moments where actually simulations and adaptive learning are actually more powerful and should be used more than face-to-face learning. And that's, I think, a thing people don't often think about.
No, I believe that. I think a great example of that too in like the private liberal arts, small college space is Rise Education, who they really built uh, they built courses, right? But online courses to deliver to students who are in small private schools. Well, what, at those small private schools, what do they value? They value the small class size, the engagement on campus. But the truth of the matter is that for those small private institutions to be able to scale and keep up with the types of new things that are going on in the space, they needed to have a way to start delivering content um, in an online format that shows a really high quality approach, kind of similar to what you're talking about here. Um, but I think if small private colleges that are, small private residential colleges are able to uh, give their students kind of a best in class experience for online learning, then and that's well received, which it is, then to me that's like a great test case for why the rest of the market and why the rest of us, no matter what type of education you're experiencing, need to have that same level of expectation. I mean, it'll also bring the cost down of education to deliver it at least partially in a hybrid mode, like we're talking about, right? You're not just getting us into the part of the market that's been hardest to deliver on, the simulation and the skill development. Um, but you're providing a new opportunity in the market for actually reducing the cost of delivery at the same time. And I think that's another really key benefit for this kind of approach.
Again, there's still going to be a little bit of an upfront cost, but then the long term running cost, especially when you see improvements in drop fail withdrawal rates, improvements in achievement, improvements in skill development, um, relative to the cost that both the platform and the investment that you make in generating the content, in a world of generative AI. I think the ROI is for most universities and for most courses is going to be really, really high. So yeah, I think there are a lot of use cases, and we're seeing it. I mean, these the two companies that we merged to form Skillwell, only about a third of our business has been in higher education historically. Um, but right now, more than 50% of our pipeline is in higher education, and it's growing at a very substantial clip. And it kind of goes back to the comment about ASU GSV. I think a lot of universities are recognizing the need for more dramatic change, um, and so they're willing to try new things, and that I think fits very well for who we are and what we want to do.
I agree. I agree. I think that the big indicator for you in my mind would be just if there was a way to get your arms around the idea of which institutions are doing really significant curriculum rewrites. I think that's what's happening now, right? Is you're getting um, enough pressure that, it's really difficult to say for the legislature, right? To say to a particular college or university, we need you to create more graduates that are employable in our state, right? That's a difficult like uh metric to be judged on for a whole host of reasons.
Yep.
But one of the biggest issues is that the curriculum's set, the curriculum's baked, right? So even if I want to create more experiential learning opportunities with Skillwell, I only have a few areas, a few course codes that I can begin to accelerate that in, unless I actually am going to say, okay, look, like fundamentally, here's a strategy, here's an area that we're going to really dive into and go deeper on um, to embed more experience, more opportunities into the curriculum. Now you've got those institutions when they're at that stage, and I think that many are at that stage, um, that really need a service like what you're providing, and that's what's so attractive to me about what you guys have been building. Um, but let me ask you this: I always try and bring this back to somebody that's listening who's at an institution and they're like, okay, I definitely want to explore this. at my institution. Where has been the main point of entry for Skillwell into university? Like, who's the one? And maybe this may not be as intuitive, but who do you feel like is the main consumer of the initial concept that says, yeah, let's go do this? Is this up in a provost office? Is this at a dean's level? Are you seeing this more at like the operational level, and they're sort of taking it up the chain to get approval? Where's the conversation that needs to happen internally in order to start these conversations?
Yeah, the role's called something different just about everywhere, but like in general, I would say like the director of online learning, or the people that are building online courses that are, again, generally of high value, high consequence. And that it can be a provost level decision. We're often operating maybe one level below that, where the provost challenges the head of online learning. You've got to go build great courses that are going to be engaging, and we need to get more throughput in these courses. And then they go look for, well, how do I do that? And they often end up with us, because that's what we do. So I think it's at that level today. Now, in what you were just talking about of like, where does the next phase of growth come? Like, how do we tap into the mainstream of higher education? I don't know what that looks like. What I do know is that I think the traditional kind of publisher model doesn't work for us or companies like us, of like, let's go sell faculty by faculty, course by course. Like that doesn't really work. Um, the idea that we could at an institutional level say, hey, here's a new tool in your tool belt for any of your instructors to use or any of your departments to use. Um, I think business schools are an area that we're targeting right now because because they're so important to universities as revenue streams. The online MBA programs are often, one of the most important parts of a revenue stream. But also because things that we do, like I mentioned before, business negotiations, empathetic listening, sales skills, these are things where simulations and adaptive learning are incredibly powerful. In fact, those are some of the exact same use cases that we use with some of the biggest corporations in the world. Leadership training, organizational change and management. These are literally courses that you would find in a business school catalog that are using simulations and adaptive learning in the real world, the quote real world. And we can do that for an online MBA or an online business school. So I think that's another area that we're excited about. Like, we've got some examples already, but I think we'll see more there. So yeah, I think there's well, and I'll say another area that I know you mostly focus on North America, but Latin America, we're seeing a ton of early opportunity there, just partially because of the massive imbalance that exists in Latin America between the number of now middle class families that want to send their kids to school and the limited number of traditional universities that exist to service them. And so online is the only way to do that. I mean, you've got places in Brazil, Croton, Positivo, something like that, where you've got 1 million students that are enrolled in one university because traditional universities have never caught up with the increase in demand. So I think there's some of those factors that kind of guide where we come into the institution.
Yeah, that makes it. You're right. I am very North America centric in a lot of the work I've been doing, but yeah, certainly there's a global uh movement here that I think we're, to some degree, I would say the US is catching up to other parts of the world. And in some cases we're a little bit ahead, but so let me kind of wrap on a couple thoughts here. I mean, I think um, one is I wonder if your experience in the corporate space gives gives any I wonder if you have any insights from the corporate space in terms of what it takes to have corporate partnerships um, that would be helpful for higher ed to learn. Some higher ed institutions are phenomenal at, you gave the example of Ivy Tech, right? Great corporate relationship.
Not actually a client. I just love them because
Yeah,
they're right down the street. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I can think of a few. There's a Bowling Green State University
Yeah, for sure.
has really good corporate relationships. Clearly, there's some across the board, but I'm just curious if people listening to this are thinking about their corporate partnerships too, as we unpack conversations like this, because ultimately, what we're talking about is all leading down that path towards that job readiness component. I don't know, any feedback or perspective that you could share working with large corporates over at Skillwell, and also, I mean, I guess generally throughout your career.
I would say one of the things that I've noticed is how these things evolve is it's often not us doing the selling. I mean, yes, we show people what we can do. Where we have the most success is where there is a champion within the organization or the institution. And I can go all the way back to my days at Angel Learning and Blackboard and Open LMS, and I could almost name those people at many of the institutions that were the most successful. And these are people that are just like, this is important. I'm going to make this work come hell or high water. And if you're going to get in my way, look out, because I'm going to bust through walls to get this done. And it starts there. But the most successful ones of those are just become great leaders, and that get a bunch of people then to surround them and move that whole thing forward. And so in corporations, we see people like there are people in our client base, and I'm not going to name any names. Some of them we're not allowed to for specific reasons, but um, where people have made a bet on this, on this being a really effective form of training employees, and they've actually had career success because of it, right? Like it's actually changed the trajectory of their career, but they've also built a team of people that support them and grow them. And I think in academia the same thing is true. I can name there are specific individuals that are champions of Skillwell within their organizations, but they've also developed, it's not just them, they've developed the people around them to care about skills-based learning, to care about immersive learning, so that that kind of lives on and grows. But those champions are just, they're just so important, and they're people that have just decided like status quo is not good enough. We're going to go do something different. And I love to watch those people work. I think this is going, let's keep cycling back to the beginning of this conversation. I think a lot of those people were at ASU GSV, and I was talking to some of them next week. I feel like a lot of them are tired right now because they feel like they've been banging that drum for a while, but it does feel like many of them are finally starting to kind of break through, and see that organizational change that needs to happen to support these types of things. And so that's what I see consistently across my career is find those organizations where you've got somebody that has just decided, I'm going to take this on and it's going to be a success come hell or high water. And um, I mean, it's not that different than the way I approach my job every day sometimes. So, but watching those people work, we're working on a very big project right now that I hope to be able to announce to the world very soon. And I can think of the very specific individual who she's just the last 18 months has been a force of nature getting this done and driving organizational change at one of the largest corporations in the United States. And and I'm excited to see, like we just wrapped up a pilot, and and it was super successful, and I'm excited to see what the global rollout looks like, and I can't wait to be able to share what that looks like with the world. But I'd love to watch that. Darren, I don't know if you have similar experiences, but man,
Oh,
those things
yeah,
are fun to watch. And
absolutely.
you can probably name some of those people from some of your most successful clients, right? Even if you go back 15 or 20 years.
Yeah, no, it's one of the things that I think when I talk to my clients that are trying to sell into higher ed, it's one of those things that higher ed appreciates most of the advice that I give, which is that um, rather than selling into an institution, what we're really looking for is readiness, right? And there's readiness doesn't mean if you're not ready that you're wrong. Readiness actually means that that person who becomes that champion was actually at a point to really receive and accept exactly the message that you had at the time, right? And it's it's not a failure when somebody's like, hey, no, not right now, right? The failure is actually trying to force that. The success is actually seeing that um, that when you really have true readiness at an account level, the the impact is you get that champion who's really ready to dream big, to facilitate this on a level that's equal to or even more lofty of a vision than your own. And yeah, this is where the transformation happens. So no, I love that angle and that perspective. Let me ask you one last question. I know we're actually at time, but just uh, a year from now, if we're having this conversation again, what do you hope to be able to tell listeners that you've accomplished relative to the higher ed space? Like, what's your wish for your work in higher ed in the next year?
Yeah, I think, growing the use case that we already have and then expanding into new use cases with a lot of universities, both domestically and around the world. I think we want to see the result, the amazing results that we've seen and that we've researched with some of our existing clients about dramatic improvements in DFW achievement, skills, all those types of things, that we've just been able to share that with more clients. Our I mean, any ed tech company is only successful if the institutions that they sell to are also successful. And so if we can see that kind of, if we can see adoption of our platform at both small scale and at large scale that's leading to those types of outcomes, I think our clients in the market are going to be delighted, and that's going to lead to great business outcomes for us. So, um, more institutions leveraging the platform, the institutions that we already have leveraging it deeper and more fully, us bringing down that entry point or the barriers to entry to adaptive, where you don't feel like you have to build 70 versions of the same course to drive a truly adaptive course. Um, or if you do, that we make that so easy that you feel comfortable doing it. Those are success to me. And then I'll add one based on this conversation, which has been in the back of my mind, and I don't know that I'll articulate it well, is because we sit in both markets. I do think that we might potentially have a role in helping translate and create that connection between the two of them. Darren, I was on the board of what was called IMS and now it's called One Ed Tech. And one of the things that standards bodies do is they create this mechanism for moving data and information around. And to your earlier comment about all the different definitions of skills and competencies that are out there, it does feel like that's an area where I am spending some time on it, but I'd like to spend some more time, is kind of helping create that translation engine between those two. Because we've talked for as long as I've been alive about, we've got all these jobs and we have all these employees, but they don't have the right skills, and universities aren't training and colleges aren't training. Like, we've said that for long enough. Like, let's actually sit down and try to at least take some steps towards solving that. And I think part of it is, let's agree on the definition of what a skill is, or at least go from 1,000 definitions down to 3 or 4 maybe. And let's create a mechanism for communicating those back and forth between um, corporations that are wanting to hire people or promote people, and universities and colleges that are wanting to train and educate people, and learners that are wanting to, get the next job or elevate themselves. So I think that would be really interesting too. That would be, I would put that on the business doesn't depend on that, but man, if I could be a part of that conversation, it would be very personally fulfilling for me.
There's several real unlocks there in your comments. So we'll hold you to it in a year. But I think, yeah, the the space of getting higher ed more comfortable with skill definition that's aligned to industry, check. I think also in what I hear you saying about sort of healthy growth of your portfolio and your solution inside of higher ed, what's so compelling to me is it feels like this is one of those examples, and there are others, but this is one of those examples where um, Skillwell shows a return on investment as the adoption increases, right? And so like that's why you're able to tell these stories, these sort of different use cases. And I feel like, yeah, a year from now, being able to continue to sort of expand on that value that institutions are getting, and it's a real, return in terms of lowering their costs over time. It's a real return in terms of, student completion, reduction in DFW rates, and all of the like. So love it.
Well, listen, man, I appreciate you inviting me to chat with you. It's always fun to chat. Like, the funny part about this is, honestly, this doesn't. I know we're recording this now for your podcast, but this doesn't feel that different than the conversations that you and I have almost every time we chat. So
Yeah.
people are seeing the real thing, which is fun.
Yeah, well, and it helps to have a script and then not use it. That's my
Oh, well done. I'm glad
trick.
I'm glad you had AI. I'm glad you had AI generate that script that we didn't follow at all. So
Exactly. This is an example of where AI is not quite there. Appreciate you taking the time, and look forward to seeing more of the success at Skillwell.
I am too, man. Hopefully you'll be a part of it.